Hi everyone, and welcome to the first in my series of art journaling workshops which are kindly funded by Dublin City Arts Office. My name is Breda Jackson of Mooncat Art Design, and over the course of the workshops I'll be showing you how to create beautiful art journals using lots of different techniques. Unfortunately, we can't gather at Mud Island Community Garden at the moment, but I will be taking lots of inspiration from there, and hopefully I'll inspire you too. So what is art journaling? Well, journals can be places to record your inner thoughts or a place for your memories. It can act like a diary or an organizer or a combination of all of these things. It can be made up of paintings, drawings, collages, photos, diary entries, everyday items, poetry or personal writings. Art journals allow you to get creative, and by expressing yourself you can really lose yourself for a while. Journal pages themselves can be made up of so many things: printed backgrounds, painted backgrounds, collaged elements, envelopes, secret tucks. The sky's the limit, and how you approach it will be very personal to you. I'll be showing you as many techniques as possible so you can get started on your own journaling journey. To kick off the workshop series, today I'll be showing you how to create decorative papers using monoprinting techniques, and also how you can use the decorative papers to create collages and decorative elements for your journals. In later workshops we'll be working on creating DIY journals, mostly from recycled materials, and I'll show you how you can fill your journal with lots of creative loveliness. To support the workshops, you'll find lots of extra info in the video description, such as material lists, links to printed images that you can download and print for your journals, and lots of extra tips and tricks. Please feel free to ask me any questions in the comments, and subscribe to my channel to get notifications. You can also join me in a private Facebook group where you can ask questions, share your work, and discuss all things journaling. It's also somewhere where I can give you lots of extra info and journaling prompts. You'll find the link to the Facebook group in the video's description, so please join me there. And now let's get started with workshop 1. Okay, so I'm going to show you some monoprinting techniques to create some decorative papers that we can use in our journals. So we can use them in many different ways, as backgrounds, as cover paper, as we can cut them out to create decorative shapes. You can use them in so many ways. You can create little envelopes from the papers that you've decorated through the monoprinting techniques. So I'm going to show you a few different ways to approach it today. And first of all, I'm just going to go through the list of things that we're going to use, some materials that we'll need. So first of all, we'll need some acrylic paint. So any liquid paint will do, even poster paint should do the job as well. And these are widely available acrylic paints. You just pick the colours that you want to use, but some basic primary colours will allow you to mix many different colours for the technique. The paint is rolled onto a plate. So the plate I'm using today is just a little acrylic sheet. It's just a little bit bigger than A5. But you can use any smooth surface, so you could use a piece of glass. Just be careful that it's not too thin and that it's on a very level surface, because you will be applying pressure to it, and if you're using glass, you just need to be careful that it doesn't crack under that pressure. But if you don't have perspex or glass, you can also use something like a presentation folder, which normally has like a clear or a smooth surface. So that's just like a plastic surface. So you could use that as a plate, and it's probably a good idea to tape it down because it's a bit lighter and it'll move a little bit more. But so you can see that's as smooth a surface as that, and that would be perfectly adequate. So use what you've got at home as your plate, and it can be any size as well. Whatever size you want to print is fine. To transfer your ink onto your plate in a kind of a thin layer, you'll need something like this brayer or roller, and they come in many different shapes and sizes, so you can have big ones or little ones, and that allows you to roll the ink onto the plate in a kind of a thinnish layer. Now, it's not absolutely necessary to have one of these, because you can use a paintbrush to paint the paint directly onto the plate, and that would be fine as well. The techniques I'm going to show you today are going to create textures on the plate that you then pick up through the print, and you can use all sorts of things that you might have lying around the house to create those textures in the paint. So something like this bubble wrap is brilliant. So it's impressed into the ink, and you can use it both as creating a texture on the plate and as a stamp. So I'll go through all those techniques with you. So bubble wrap is great. We can try out other kind of textures as well. I'm not too sure if this will work, but I have a piece of lace here that you could also maybe create an impression in the plate. It mightn't pick up the impression on the plate, but I'm sure it will allow us to actually stamp it onto a piece of paper. So we'll be using a couple of different techniques, stamping and taking a print directly from the plate. You can also use things like, the bottom of vegetable trays, plastic vegetable trays like this one. I've cut this one up to size, and as you can see, it's got like an indented pattern on it, which is ideal for creating texture on the plate or for using as a stamp. These are at the bottom. These textures are at the bottom of most vegetable or meat trays. Here's another one, which has a different kind of a shape, a smaller shape, but quite interesting. I hope you can see that. And this is another one that I discovered after I used it as a palette, but it's still underneath quite an interesting kind of texture that we can use on the plate. Things like vegetable bag netting is also great, so we'll have a go at that. That will definitely transfer some ink onto paper. Whether it'll create an impression in the plate is another thing, but we'll experiment with that as well. And then there's lots of things that you can use to draw directly onto the plate to create marks, like the back of a paintbrush will allow you to draw into the plate to create marks, and negative and positive marks, or something like a chopstick will do the job as well, or even a blunt pencil or anything that has a sharp end on it. Something like this comb will also create some lovely pattern if you do it in a kind of a wavy pattern, or in a wavy motion. So something like a comb would be great, as would a toothbrush. So the bristles on that toothbrush will create a certain texture on the plate when you draw through the ink. Something like this little plastic fork as well will allow you to create lines and pattern on the plate to be picked up in a print. Things like cling foam are also really, really good. So when you scrunch it up and impress it into the plate, it creates texture for you to to print. And then you've got things like bottle tops, which when you push into the wet paint will take away some of it and create circular patterns. And you can get those in all shapes and sizes, as you know. This one as well has a different type of mark on it, so that might be interesting. Might be able to pick up that for stamping. Things like string as well. You can lay string in your inked plate to create all sorts of patterns when you print over it. So it acts like a kind of a resist to the ink on the plate. When I say ink, I mean paint. And you can also, in that same idea of a resist, this is a homemade stencil that I've made using this kind of acetate sheet. It's a very thin acetate sheet called Mylar. And you know, you can, a lot of the time you can get this type of stuff in packaging even, or like the presentation folders you could probably use, if it was thin enough you could use the same thing. But essentially what I've done is I've cut out this pattern out of the Mylar, and that creates a stencil, you know, which you can sponge through onto paper as well. That's another technique that that you could do. But the inside of that stencil, so the negative of that stencil, can act like a mask on your plate as well. So we'll be using that as a kind of a resist to mask it out. And I'll show you how to do that when we come to it. If you don't have any acetate sheet like that, you can actually create these in thin card. They won't last as long, but you'll get a few prints out of them. And you know, if you dry them, if you use the negative piece and let them dry, you'll probably be able to use them over and over again. So you can cut out all sorts of shapes as resists into that you can lay on your plate. What else have we got? As well as these bottle tops, you can use the inside of a toilet roll to create circular patterns as well. So they're more or less the things that we'll use today. Oh, actually no, I've got more. I've got these little stamps, these little homemade stamps I've made. And I've made these out of craft foam. So you can get this everywhere really. And essentially all I've done is I've created, I've drawn in a floral shape in this case onto the foam, and I've also drawn into the inside of that shape with a biro. And you need to kind of lean quite heavily on that to make an indent in it that will create that negative shape once you stamp it. And essentially I'll use this as a stamp. I'll ink it up using the ink from the plate or directly with the roller. And I've just mounted it onto a piece of cardboard to make it easier for me to stamp it onto some paper. So you can make your own stamps. You can make all sorts of stamps using that technique. If you don't have any foam, I've used this, the back of, or the base of a vegetable tray again. This is like styrofoam, but that will do the job as well. So you can cut out your shape and draw into it like you would with the foam to create some stamps. So they're more or less the techniques that we're going to go through in the workshop today to create decorative papers for your journal. You'll need some paper obviously as well. And what I'm going to use is some just plain printing paper from your, this is just copier paper that you use in your printer. And I've cut it into an A5 size just to fit my plate. So you can use any size. If you're using a bigger plate, you can use bigger paper. This is ideal because it picks up the ink quite easily, and once you've printed it, it's very easy to cover things with because it's quite thin. So that's the ideal paper to use for your printing. And that's more or less everything that you'll need. So we'll just need some cleaning up equipment. So I would advise a cloth or some baby wipes to clean your plate, a wet cloth, and maybe a bit of kitchen towel to dry it, or a dry cloth will do. So that's it. We will get that underway, and I will show you all the different techniques that I've just gone through. I'm going to start off by showing you more or less all the techniques just in one colour. I'm just going to use this phthalo blue colour to just show you the different things that I was going through. And then once these prints are dry, I can show you some overprinting techniques as well with other colours. So I'm just going to speed it up a wee bit here. So I'm just rolling out the paint onto the acetate sheet, which is my plate, using the little roller that I showed you in the intro. If you get too much paint onto your plate at once, you can take off the excess on a separate sheet of paper, like I'm doing here. And those pieces of paper can be used as backgrounds as well. Sometimes they're quite nice. Now I'm impressing the bubble wrap into onto the plate, onto the wet paint, and the stamp that I used from the vegetable tray, and the tablet, the old tablets. And now I'm pulling my first print, just gently going over with my finger, and pulling the so you get the impression of all the things that you put onto the plate. I'm going to also pull a second print called a ghost print, which will be lighter, but you'll generally get two from each plate as long as the paint doesn't dry. So you need to be pretty quick with the second one. Now I'm going to use the paint that I picked up under the bubble wrap straight onto a piece of paper. So that's more like a stamping technique. So you could have also painted the bubble wrap and done it that way. So any ink that I have left on the tablets, and I'm just going to add a little bit more using my roller, that can be printed as well. And also the ink that's left on the vegetable tray pattern. So again, that's a stamping technique. So I'm just going to clean the plate. So now I'm rolling out the ink again for the next print. Just getting it as smooth as I can. Obviously, if you don't have a roller, just use a paintbrush to get your paint onto your printing surface. Whether that's an acrylic sheet or a piece of a folder or whatever you have. So now I'm going to draw into the ink or the paint using the implements that I mentioned earlier on, the comb, the chopstick, the toothbrush, and that will give me some nice marks, as you can see here. I'm going to take another ghost print as well from it, which will be lighter, like the second one will always be lighter. and sometimes you see the marks more clearly. So in this one we're going to use the little bottle tops and see what sort of marks that we can make. And I'm going to use a different colour this time. I'm going to use a pinkish paint, fuchsia type colour. So I'm just impressing the bottle tops into the paint on the plate. And they're different sizes, and the edge on the smaller one is a little bit wider, so that will make a different mark. As you're picking the paint from the plate, you could also use the bottle top as a stamp. I'll show you that in a minute. The toilet roll, if you actually move it as you place it down, it gives you a kind of a 3D kind of effect. And again, you can use that to print as a stamp. So I'm just pulling the first print here. Just gently putting pressure on the back of the paper. That's the first one. And then I'll take a second ghost print, which will be lighter. And again, you need to do this before the paint dries, so try and do it more or less immediately. And there you have your ghost print. We'll overprint some of these later. Here we're going to use some of the bottle tops to stamp directly onto paper. So essentially what we're doing is using the plate, the inked plate, to pick up some ink with the bottle tops and applying them onto a piece of paper to stamp the ink that has been picked up. And the different bottle tops will have different effects. This one has a wider rim, so it's much more definite, but combined they're kind of nice together. The toilet roll will obviously be a bit bigger, and has more or less the same definition as the middle-sized bottle top. So experiment with whatever you have, different sizes, or anything with a rim will do the job. And this is the one that has a different pattern on it. So I'm trying to make sure I'm going into an area on the plate that has some ink on it. And that's giving me a different stamped pattern. And this is the end of the vegetable tray. As far as I remember, it was a vegetable tray. So I'm just picking up ink on that and using it as a stamp again. So this gives quite an interesting range of marks. So look out for these type of patterns in packaging that you might have at home. The bottom of biscuit trays are good as well. So there you have it. That's using the stamping technique. Here I'm going to use some cling film to make an impression in the plate. It'll create a texture of the folded plastic into the paint, and that will be picked up in a print. I'm also going to lay down the mask I mentioned earlier, and that will just resist the ink in that area. So I'm going around it carefully with my finger just to pick up as much ink as possible. Now that will give quite a large white area, or whatever colour your paper is, because it's resisted, that shape has resisted the ink going onto the paper. But what is more interesting is when you lift up the mask, and that will have left the impression in the plate, and that creates some quite nice effects. So my ghost print will have a more defined shape of the mask. So here I'm going to use the string as a resist. So wherever I lay this down, you know, the ink won't transfer onto the paper, so I'll get a white space, and it's going to be quite wide because the string is, as you can see underneath vaguely, it'll leave quite a wide line. But what's more interesting is when you pick it up and you do a ghost print. So the texture of the actual string will be much more apparent. I'm going to take a second ghost print because there was quite a lot of ink on the plate. So you can judge this yourself. These are quite nice. Here I'm using the lace to try and create an impression on the plate, create the lace texture essentially into the paint. I'm also going to use some cling film here, again to create that texture, so you see when I lift it up what texture is left. And then I'm going to pull a print. The texture of the cling film will be picked up, but the lace is going to resist, so I'll be left with a white shape. So you see that, so you see it there. But if I lift the lace now, the texture that's left in the plate can be printed into that white area. I'll take a ghost print. Sorry, my head is kind of coming into view. And that's probably more detailed, like ghost prints can be. So I'm going to try and print whatever ink is on the lace. I'll just put a piece of paper over it to try and get the impression. And I've got something, it's a little bit faint. So I'm going to do it again. This time picking up hopefully a bit more paint. And print directly onto the paper. This time I'm going to use my roller to apply a little bit more pressure. There, you see it a little bit more clearly now. I'm also going to use my stamps, my homemade stamp that I made out of the foam shapes. And I'm going to take a ghost print as well. So I've taken some of the prints and I've started overprinting them. For example, with this one, I've created this stamp made out of foam again, with the cardboard backing, and I've just been stamping different colours over the original print, which was the circle one. I'm just going to show you how I'm going to do that. So you just get the roller and you can roll directly onto this. It's probably the easiest way when you're doing this, when you're just doing some over stamping. And you just place it down like that. Okay. So this gives the prints a lot more dimension and a mixture of colour. So we'll let them dry, and I'll do a run through of the printed papers that we've got at the end of the session. So I also want to show you how you can do a third layer in terms of overprinting on some of your papers. So in some cases they might be too plain, or you might want to add some more colour to them, or they mightn't have quite worked out. You can always overprint them again to change them in another way. And one way I find is really good is to use the masks that I spoke about. In this case, I've just cut some out of card, just from some food packaging. So it's a little box for popcorn in this case. So I've cut out some shapes that can be laid down on the plate, which will act as a resist and keep some areas in your existing print. And what I'll do is use a contrasting colour to have a good contrast between what's kept underneath the resist and what is actually on the existing print. So I'll use these homemade card ones, and I'll also use one of my ones that I've cut out from my mylar, which is the kind of acetate material that you can cut stencils and masks from. So just rolling out orange on the plate here, and I'm picking one of the more plain patterned prints, and I'm going to place the masks on the plate, bearing in mind that the print will always print in reverse. So if I want something masked on the right hand side of the print, I have to put it on the left hand side of the plate. So you just need to bear that in mind when you're working that out. So I'm just being careful to go around the masks to pick up the paint onto the print, especially between the masks themselves. And there you go. So you'll see the overprint and what's left from the masks resisting on the plate. And when you pull those off, you can pull a ghost print as well. So it's always worth pulling a ghost print, and you can overprint it again at any stage. So just use what's on the plate to create another print. This time I'm rolling a darker colour, kind of a dark blue, a blue purple, and again placing the masks down on the plate. And you can put as many as you want on the plate, and placing the print on top. Be careful again to go around, especially around the masks, to pick up the paint on the edges and in the middle. And I'm just lifting the plate but holding it at the bottom, because if I hold it at the bottom I can just keep it in place and put it back down to redo any places that where the paint hasn't adhered to the print. So I'll keep doing that until I'm happy. There you go. That one has a high contrast, so you can see. In this one, I'm going to put two colours on the plate. So I'm going to create a gradient on the plate, blend in the ink, and I'm just being careful when I go between the two colours to thoroughly clean my brayer. So you might need two paintbrushes if you're using a paintbrush. And then when you get to the middle you can kind of blend them together. So I'm going to pick a light coloured print. So it's one of the earlier ghost prints. And I'm going to use the Mylar mask this time. This time I'm going to use my roller to roll the back of the paper. Sometimes it's easier to pick up the ink around a mask with the roller, but you can get the same effect if you just take a little bit of time, lift up your print, have a look, see what's missing, put it back down again. And you can see me doing that a number of times, especially in between those leaf shapes where the area is quite thin. And the gradient is quite nice. So lifting off the mask, and the paint has dried a wee bit on the bottom, so I'm just going to add a little bit more before I take the ghost print. This one is another gradient, from pink to the kind of mauve blue. And again I'm going to use my roller to help that along. And it doesn't matter that the back of the print is getting all covered in paint, because most probably it'll be stuck down to something or folded in on itself as an envelope. So again, I'm checking all the time to make sure that the paint is getting onto the print. So I'm going to have a quick run through of some of the papers that, now that they're dry, you know, papers where we've used stamping, we've used masks. We've used combination of masks and stamping. You know, we've done some high contrast ones. We've, in this case, the ink has gone under the mask, but that's all right because that's created its own unique pattern. Some are lighter than others. Some use a combination of light ghost prints and gradients. And in this case, the card masks were used to again create a high contrast and then a ghost print. This is stamping just on its own without any other technique involved. So this is a combination of stamping and bubble wrap printing. So you can, get such a wide variety of different types of papers using all the different techniques. Using different colors and using light underprints with gradients overprinted. You'll achieve quite a variety of different papers for your project. And these are just some of the papers that were used to clean the brayer, and you can see some of them are quite lovely, and you can use them as well as backgrounds, or you can use them in all the papers to make these little envelopes, which are very simple, are a very simple construction. Just folding and gluing is required to actually make them. And I've linked a tutorial in the video description. And I'll just show you quickly how you can insert one into this little journal. I'll be going through this in more detail in the next workshop. But all you need to do is just add it in, glue it down on one side, and it can flip out then to allow you to insert something into it. In the next part, I'm just going to go through making a collage using the printed papers as well as some other elements. Okay, so now we're going to actually work in our journal using lots of different elements to make up a collage. So this is just a typical kind of sketchbook journal which I'll use. The first thing I'm going to do is just insert some pages, because I'm going to cover the pages in this gesso. So gessos essentially will kind of seal the pages so that you can put a lot of different elements on top. Now, if you don't have acrylic gesso, I've put up a homemade recipe for it, which is essentially made up of PVA glue, white paint, and some corn flour. And if you don't have corn flour, I just advise you to paint your page with PVA, let it dry, and then paint over a layer of white paint. So it's not essential to have this. So have a look at the link for the homemade recipe for it. So that's the first thing I'm going to do, is put some gesso on. I'll just go through some of the things that might that could possibly be incorporated in the page. It's going to be inspired by the spring, inspired by the Mud Island Community Garden as well, and all that happens out there, especially this time of year, with everything beginning to grow and seeds being planted. And so I thought spring would be a nice theme. So I've got some a printout of a music sheet here of a Billie Holiday song, Some Other Spring, and any of these printed files are available to you in the if you look in the video information in the description. I'll have links to all sorts of digital files that you can print yourself for your own use. Essentially, I might be tearing some of this up as part of the collage. Some other book pages that I might use are, which are also available to you in the downloads, like a dictionary of garden, which I thought was relevant. And again, I can tear some of these up to incorporate them into the collage. These printouts of tickets are also, the files are also available to you. So these can be cut out and can attach elements in the collage, or they can be part of the collage. I'm not sure yet. Other printouts that are available to you as well. This one has been tea stained, so it's actually been painted with a diluted a solution of tea and dried very, very quickly in the oven. I'm going to show you how to actually do this in the next workshop, but this is a nice kind of old effect, so that could, some parts of that could also be incorporated. I also have some of my my printouts that we did earlier in the monoprint session. So I have some other ones as well, different colours. Not too sure how many of these I'll incorporate, but we'll see. And I also, you can also in your collages, you can use old magazines. This is a lovely old gardening magazine that I've been given, and I have one page in it that I might use. So I love these roses, so I might cut one of these out and incorporate it in as well. I'll also photograph these for you so you can use them as well. You'll just need to print them out in colour. I might also, you know, I have all sorts of different pieces of paper, and I have another one of my stencils. So this time I'm going to use the, oh, where's it gone? The stencil of this leaf. So I'm going to maybe sponge through that onto the page. And I have a little poem as well from an old book. This is actually from a book. So I thought it was relevant because it's a poem about spring. So I'll try and get that in as well. And that's about it. I have this other paper that's kind of textured and it's got a kind of an old feeling. But I'll show you how to age these as well. So just making a start on the collage here by applying gesso to my sketchbook pages. I'm using a double page and I'm protecting the under pages with just 2 pieces of paper. So just applying this in a thin layer and with a brush and allowing it to dry. And I've already torn up some of the elements, the music pages, the printed pages, the pages from the book, and I'm beginning to lay them down to work out the composition in advance of gluing them. I'm going to use PVA, watered down PVA glue to attach them to the page, but you can use any glue. You can use Pritt stick there, that's quite handy, or any glue that you have. But it's important to kind of work out how they're going to be layered in advance. And what I also like to do is take a photograph once I've worked out the composition, so I know what has to be glued down first, and how they need to be layered for the final result. So at this stage you're just playing around with the composition, finding something that you like, taking things away, adding things, use your printed papers and all the other elements that are available to you, whatever you have to hand. So the poem and the rose are probably the last things I'll glue down. and this is a little printout of a bee that will be included in your printed papers in the description that you can print. And I'll have lots of other things that you can include for your own personal collage. So I'm going to start gluing them. I'll take them all off the plate and start gluing them down in order as I've arranged them. Apologies, there's a bit of a shine on the from the light of the camera, so but hopefully you can get a good idea of how I'm doing it. Now there's no right or wrong way to do this. You can literally arrange it as you want it. And you can include any elements that that are relevant to what you're actually making the collage about. And please feel free to ask me any questions about any of this in the comments of the video, or if you join the Facebook group, you can also ask me there. So as I'm going along, I'm still working out that everything is fitting okay. And I've dried this layer now because I'm just going to do some over printing with my stencil. Just trying to figure out the best place for it. So I just play around with that. Taking into consideration where that bee might go if I use it. So I'm just taking some acrylic paint and a little makeup sponge to sponge through the stencil with the acrylic paint to create that leaf shape. And it's a little bit too light, so I'm just going to add some more paint, holding down the stencil in the same spot. So happy enough with that. So I've decided I'm not going to include the bee because it'll just be a little bit too busy on that side. But what I'm doing now is just applying some more of the blue paint around the rose, just behind it, just to give some balance to the composition in terms of the colour. Now I'm getting some watered down white paint, and using a toothbrush I'm just creating some splashes on the collage, and this allows just another element of texture on the collage itself. I'm also using some of the blue paint to splash with the toothbrush. This is a white pen, and I'm just going to outline the stencil. Sorry, my head got in the way there. So if you don't have a white pen, any marker or even a pencil or a colour pencil, anything that you have, if you want to outline something. I'm also creating some detail within the leaves. I'm adding some little leaf doodles as well to the right hand corner. Again, this could be with a pen or a pencil or markers or a colouring pencil. I'm also adding some little bee doodles up on the left hand side. And I've done some scribbles around the rows just to give it an outline. But I decided I didn't like that, so I've just taken it off. You can take things off easily with a baby wipe. Now I'm going to outline the poem, the paper that's the poem is on, with a little bit of eyeshadow and a makeup brush. So this gives it a kind of a vintagey look. So if you have any old eyeshadow, this is ideal to use. You just rub it gently around the edge and it gives it that kind of old look. I also have these little rubber stamps of a butterfly that I'm going to use. And I can link them in the video description as well if you're interested. But you can use your own stamps, you can make your own stamps as well. So now my final two elements are being glued down, the poem and the rose. And I'm working out where the butterfly will go. I'm going to use just black ink to stamp that on. I have a smaller one, so I've decided that that's probably better. So I just stamp them on the corners of the piece of paper that the poem was on. Adding some final doodles. And that's more or less it. That's it done. And here's a close-up of the final collage, which shows you some more detail. It also brings us to the end of workshop 1 and our exploration of monoprinting and collage techniques. I really hope you've enjoyed it and have been inspired to start creating your own journals. Please feel free to ask me any questions in the comments or join the workshop Facebook group, which is linked in the video description. In the next workshop, we'll be learning how to make junk journals using recycled materials. Junk journals can be made out of all sorts of things, including the one made out of this paper shopping bag. I'll be showing you how to make this and how to decorate this kind of simple journal so that you can make them very personal to yourself. So all that remains now is to thank you very much for taking part today, and I hope to see you at the second workshop, which will be announced on the Mud Island Facebook page next week. So keep an eye out for that, and slán go fóill.